Hello, rollers. Welcome back to another episode of Classin' Up the Joint. I am your debatably friendly DM and host. My name is Colin. I use they and he pronouns. I am here with another episode to dive into 2024 rules with my fabulous returning guest that I am so happy to have back. Fabulous guest, welcome back, and please introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Kitty Stryker. I use she, her pronouns, and I would say that you're a pretty friendly DM. You are actually my DM. So
it's true. Qualified to say so.
I am an author. I write a lot about consent culture in particular, and I just finished a book called Love Rebels, How I Learned to Stop. Wait, hold on. Sorry, it's gone through several title changes. I'm going to just start that whole bit over again. I am an author and I write a lot about consent culture. I also just finished a book called Love Rebels, How I Learned to Burn It Down Without Burning Out, which is a practical guidebook as well as memoir of my experiences as an activist, hopefully to encourage people to engage in activism on their own terms in a way that feels comfortable, but also a little bit challenging for them.
That is an amazing subtitle.
Thank you.
It works.
It did
so
go through
well.
a couple. It did go through a couple. And I've got to admit, every time I say the subtitle, my brain just says, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. And I'm like, no, I was referencing that, but it's not that.
I mean, hey, I feel like if we could take a lot of good cues from Dr. Strangelove as a society, perhaps.
Absolutely. Yes. It's quite it's quite a lesson, and also a warning that I wish more people had heeded.
I think it's also something the subtitle applies to D&D and RPGs as well, and the curse of the forever DM who goes on and goes on and goes on and runs game after game after game until they suddenly leave completely.
Yeah. That's definitely, as an activist, I have struggled a lot to figure out where my boundaries are and how do I show up for my communities and push myself a little bit harder than feels comfortable, but that is still sustainable, without just pushing too hard and then disengaging entirely for months at a time, which is not really something that we can afford right now. Frankly.
I mean, ever for sure. Definitely not in present day and time as much as we slightly try to leave politics at the recording booth. Not really. And something else that you've written recently that I realize I'm putting you slightly on the spot is finding your role in activism and comparing it to finding your role in a party at an RPG table.
Yes. That was really fun. I had done a presentation for Dropout TV during the George Floyd protests, where I talked a little bit about being a street medic. And one of the things that I mentioned kind of in passing is how important it was to pick an adventuring party for a protest that covers a bunch of different tactics and needs at a protest. And then I thought, that's actually a really nice metaphor for how to figure out what you might need at a protest, how you want to protest, who do you have around you, and how do they want to solve problems? Is it compatible with how you like to solve problems? So, I think it was something relatable and a little bit playful that has some serious implications for collaborative activism.
And did I misstate that you wrote it a couple years ago, but it's just been working its way around again recently? Or
no. I wrote it up recently. I actually wrote it recently.
But the presentation was a couple years. Okay.
The presentation was a couple years ago, and then I just sort of had it in a notebook. I was like, I'll write about that someday. And when I was trying to figure out how I wanted to contribute this round of anti-fascist work, that was one of the things that I decided to do.
Yeah. And does it also kind of feature in, to highlight the book for a minute before we start talking about Warlocks too much, which I am excited to get to, but does the book also make some of these comparisons, analogies of like how you can find what you have spoons or spell slots to contribute in your activism so it doesn't lead to that burnout so quickly?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, and I talk about how it impacted me when I wasn't paying attention to that, when I was more fixated on I have to accomplish this goal
Mm-hmm.
versus how can I do a little bit every day consistently over years. And I just sort of did everything all at once. To put that in a campaign's terms, if you're going through a dungeon, you don't want to use all of your spell slots in the first battle, especially if you're pretty sure that the first battle isn't the big bad. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to pace yourself in terms of which spells can you use most cleverly? How can you lean on the other people in your party to help you stretch those spell slots out? How do you demand rest so that you can get those spell slots back?
Yeah. When can you get to take those? I again, to kind of take that analogy to present day, and kind of like, well, we had 4 years where you could get by on cantrips, sort of. Still got to pay attention, still got to like do something, hopefully, but you can get by on the cantrips and like actually taking this rest. And now spell slots are very much needed again. Right.
Yeah. And like figuring out, do I have to fight every time, or can I talk my way out of this, or can I solve this problem in a different way? When does it make sense to be sneaky? When does it make sense to take a stand and be really blunt and obvious? There's a lot of techniques that you learn in D&D that is equally applicable, I think, to activism.
Yeah. Well, and I hope more people will be buying this book and finding it. Where can people find your book or your multiple books? Because I know there are multiple.
They can't find Love Rebels yet. It won't be out until December. So you'll have to wait. Unless you want to write a review of it, in which case you can email me and I will probably send you a PDF. I'm really looking to get feedback from different activists. It's already written, so it's not getting edited at this point, but it's helpful for me to get that feedback so that the next time I write a book, I can take that stuff on board. Every book seems to get a little bit better because I get that kind of feedback. So I'm very excited for that. You can find my books on Thrift Books, or you can find them on, I think it's bookstore.org or bookshop.org. I always forget which one it is.
I think Bookshop, the network of independent books.
Bookshop.org,
I think it's Bookshop.
Yeah, then they order through indie bookstores and stuff. You can find it on Amazon. I do appreciate it if people buy it on Amazon or review it, especially on Amazon, because it does get it to more eyes, and that is helpful. But also Amazon is a hellscape, so I like to give people options. You can also get it at your local library, and I am a huge fan of that. Please feel free to take out my books at the local library. There's also an audiobook for Say More Consent Conversations for Teens, which I recorded in your studio. So you can also listen to that.
Yeah. And we talked about Say More a little last time as well, and I want to come back to that just again in the bringing consent work into both tabletop and to younger people and how important it is. And I guess I'm just saying how admirable I think it is that you are doing this, and to give that book another little shout out of if you have kids, you should probably have that book.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think if you should read it for yourself too. I mean, it's very much, it is kind of a reworking of Ask Yourself, which was my workbook for consent culture stuff. But I gotta say, I think Say More, since it focuses on consent culture in interpersonal relationships that aren't necessarily sexual or romantic, but power structures or friendships, or classmates, people you can't necessarily decide who you want to hang out with and who you don't. I think that there's actually a lot of solid lessons there for adults also.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I have been doing some amount of research, i.e., reading tabletop horror stories on Reddit for our newest segment, Info Dump, with Hannah and myself, and the number of people that seem to be writing these horror stories, both about D&D specifically, about their tabletop game, and just because this is the part of Reddit I'm like finding some schadenfreude in of like, am I the asshole and whatever. The amount of people that seem to not understand or not have been taught consent and communication in a healthy way is truly staggering.
It's really interesting. I mean, I think that consent in the context of Dungeons and Dragons is particularly interesting because there are so many mind control spells. And if you're a bard or certain flavors of warlock, you are going to be using a lot of spells that are about manipulating somebody else without their knowledge or consent. And I think that if you're at a table where you're having conversations about why that is sometimes baked into D&D as a way to get things done, but is also not an acceptable thing to do. I think it not only makes characters a little more interesting. Yeah. Because how can you really be a hero if you're willing to manipulate people like that for your own ends? But also, like, I think that having that internal conflict of when, like, do I deserve to do this? Like, what makes me have the right, or like, how do I feel when it's done to me? I think that can open up really interesting conversations at the table if everybody is interested in having those conversations. I've also seen a lot of stories from people who don't seem to understand why, say, a nat 20 on a skill check does not necessarily mean that the ladies at the tavern will sleep with you when they initially said no. And there's a lot of people for whom D&D is escapism, and they want to have things that they feel like they should have access to in their day-to-day life. And they really fight that idea that, even NPCs have autonomy. So it's intriguing. And I think you learn a lot about people and how they interact with those kinds of situations that come up in D&D.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it is what you hit for me is the like that it's kind of baked into D&D in some ways with the specific spells that a lot of different people have access to, the stereotypes around bards and how a lot of people lean into playing them. You're kind of forcing your DM as a player, if you're leaning into that, to make a lot of decisions about consent for their whole internal world and universe, as they are all of these NPCs in the tavern that maybe just don't want to sleep with you.
Absolutely. I mean, I do think it's really, I think some of those issues would get resolved in a way. I mean, it's a fucked up way. I don't necessarily think this is entirely ethical, but like, if you as a DM say, okay, if this is a world in which that works, it also works on you. Yeah. I think that a lot of people who want to do that behavior don't want it done to them. And I think that can kind of unsettle somebody to the point of understanding why that's not okay. However, that is a dangerous game, and might make everybody else at the table uncomfortable.
You get some really weird one-upsmanship there, and I'm all for giving your big bad or your intermediate bad like some ability to cast dominate person, say, or like a similar thing. If it's I'm going to say, if you as a DM are trying to do that, whether or not you're trying to teach your players a lesson about consent, you want to do that if you're removing some of your players' agency for a I'm going to call it a narratively satisfying reason. And
Yeah.
hopefully checking in with, at the very least, the player who was about to have that spell cast on them during that session, reach out to them beforehand and be like, hey, you're the target for this big bad for this spell, and can I do this for storytelling reasons? Not presumably it's not because you don't like this player. That seems like you shouldn't be playing with them.
Sure. I mean, one of the things I play a lot online, and so I really love that I can have a back channel open with the DM. And so if something is happening and I'm like, this, I don't want to stop the game, but I do want to talk about this. I can send a message privately, and then I have said something and we can retcon or we can talk about it further. Incidentally, this was a situation that came up for me when I was playing a bard who I was a sad dad bard. I was like learning self-confidence, but also learning that maybe music was not actually where my bard talent lay, but instead sort of being a good sort of dad rallier, like the sort of coach kind of dynamic.
The cheerleader.
And part of the story for him was that he had separated from his wife because he had pretty much abandoned them to pursue a jam band career. And when we got back to the town that he was from, the DM was like, "Oh, like your wife is actually really happy to see you, and like you're about to reconcile." I like wrote and was like, "No, like that is." No, like he needs to understand that behavior was not okay. I am fine with that. Like I am okay with him needing to earn her trust and for her to have moved on. And like they might not, I don't think they did get back together. And he had to learn how to be present in his kid's life without being able to slip back into a relationship that he had turned his back on. And that was like a really nice way for me to like message the DM privately and say, actually, I think I see why you're doing that, but I don't want this to be a win for my character. I don't think he's earned it yet. And like able to change the world and retcon in that direction as well, where sometimes 100%. Your DM wants to throw you a bone and you're like, no.
I haven't earned that bone yet. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Let me earn the bone.
I'm doing something here.
Yeah. Well, with no real segue in mind, I think, but like something, and I guess in talking about characters that you have played, let's talk about some warlocks.
So I've never played a warlock before this warlock.
I was gonna say, I think I want to start by saying like you like I am so excited about the warlock that you have been playing in our game, and I think offer you a minute to talk about Doc and how that has been, I guess how playing a warlock for the first time has been for you over this year, and then we'll dig into some of the things that D&D is trying to do to them.
Yeah. Okay. So I have always had the impression with warlocks that they were like a less good cleric, or like a less good bard where you don't have very many spells. And sure, you get them back after a short rest, but you've only got like 3 of them. So whatever. You're also kind of weak like any spellcaster. So I was never really that inclined to play one as a whole character class. Doc Buck Brinkley is a snake oil salesman who thinks he's a cleric in the grand tradition of his family, but is in fact a bard multiclassed with a warlock. And I think part of the reason I even took warlock in a multi-class situation was I wanted more spells. So I was like, I want to have access to more stuff. I don't want to have that balancing act. I think as you get more into warlock, you get to do cooler stuff. But we're playing a 10th level and above campaign. So
Yeah.
I wanted to have some strength going in.
Well, and
And
one of the things I've said about Warlock a couple times that I'm gonna say this, and I think I want to ask if you agree that a lot of the things that Warlocks get to do are only fun over the course of a campaign. They're only fun as you watch the relationship with the patron grow, and thus your own abilities increase and add more flavor. Versus trying to do a Warlock for a one shot or like a very short game. To me, feels unsatisfying because a lot of their things I actually think are more interesting and useful outside of combat. And a lot of one shots are like, go fight this thing, and now we're done. So
right.
I'm curious how you have found it as we've gone for, a little more than a year, and I think you've added at least one Warlock level over that time, if not two.
I think just one.
Okay,
I
just
think
the
just
one.
one. Well, I don't think, I think we've only leveled up once. Did we level up twice? I'm pretty sure it's only one.
No, but that's a thing that my co-DM and I are speaking about. Anyway.
But yeah, I think one of the things that I wanted to do with Warlock, I mean, part of what I thought was interesting about putting him in a Warlock direction was that part of the whole thing about Doc was that he was in jail for poisoning the royal family through one of his curatives. And I thought, oh, what an interesting idea that, like, when he is in prison for fucking up, basically, he gets the attention of a patron who's like, oh, I could use you. You seem very, very interesting to me. And I wanted there to be sort of a tension between his family, who are all clerics, who are used to having a relationship with a divine being, and him, who never had that relationship, but is very quick to believe that a patron relationship is the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
And is very quick to be like, oh, finally, I've been blessed with this power that my whole family has been, rather than even beginning to think it could possibly be anything else. And I wanted to create that kind of relationship with a patron over time that I'm still feeling that out. Like, I haven't really done too much with, like, talking to my patron, still figuring out ways to do that and have my patron show up. I do have a really cool hat with a snake on it that shows up sometimes. I'm really enjoying the interactions between my snake familiar and me, where we have miscommunication issues from the beginning.
I really like
so
that
it's very fun.
Canonically, I think Doc now thinks 2 headbutts from the snake is yes and 1 is no, and it is in fact the complete opposite.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's very fun. It's also very fun to be like, well, is this the snake being an otherworldly being, or is this the snake being a snake? And I love that Doc misheard the name Ouroboros as Ol Boris, which also just fits really well with the, like, Wild West theme of the game. So it's been very playful. I think that I'm really glad to be playing a Warlock in this game because you and your co-DM are both really good at that kind of vibe, that playfulness, and, like, that role play back and forth. I don't think it would be as satisfying for me if I was playing a Warlock in a campaign with somebody who was better at the combat aspects versus the role play aspects.
Sure.
So I think that's a big part of it for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think having one of the things we've talked about before, you and I possibly have talked about this, that clerics and warlocks really give your party and your campaign immediate access to supernatural elements, like in theory, the beings that are shaping or driving some of the story or have some impact on it. And how nice that is over the longer term. And if you are just, dungeon crawling it up and fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. Sure, warlocks are useful because you get those spells back, but like everything else about them that provides flavor and context and more story and roleplay elements is kind of lost at that point.
They are very much related to the larger world in a way that I think a lot of classes aren't. Like, I mean, I feel like having played a paladin, in theory, you could have a DM who cares to like put the religious aspect more into that. Or, you know, that sort of divine energy of some kind, whether or not it's a god. But it's not as immediately necessary. They're not talking to their god necessarily. They're just sort of, that's their goal. That's their mindset. Well, with a cleric and warlocks, like there is much more of a conversation, which is also interesting as somebody who tends to be like a DM's pet. I like to have a way to talk to the DM in the campaign and say, what do you want me to do? I'll get the rest of them in that direction, but you have to tell me because otherwise I'm just going to be sitting here building sandcastles.
I mean, you know, sandcastles are great. Nothing wrong with sandcastles. Everybody loves a good sandcastle. It's a great time. And also, you know, the railroad tracks of the story go that way and the sandcastle's here.
It's very stable also, you know, like it's sort of fixated on one spot.
Yeah. And I think we've appreciated that on our end as well, being like, you know, spoilers for our home campaign. Now Doc has enabled us as the DM to be like, this is the next piece of the story. And your patron has now revealed itself. Ouroboros has revealed itself and kind of now inspired Doc to I'm trying to decide if we officially named you a prophet or just said you will save the land and kind of left it at that.
I think you said that I would save the land and I completely misinterpreted it. I mean, I'm really enjoying playing Doc as kind of a dummy. And like overly
very
confident.
Self-confident. Yeah. Very self-confident.
Very self-confident. I mean, he's a snake oil salesman, right? I named him after Dr. Brinkley, who is the guy famous for goat gonad surgeries, which he did for like 40 years and created the FCC pretty much, who was constructed to fight him. It's wild. A wild story. Definitely read about him.
I mean, the amount of amazing, like, odd medical lore and things that have come into my general sphere of knowledge because of this character, it just makes me so much happier.
Honestly, the more I read about the original Brinkley, the more I'm like, ooh, I can't wait to find a way for that to be somehow related to Doc. I mean, I also think it's interesting to be playing a snake oil salesman who really genuinely wants to heal people and has learned that showmanship is the way to persuade people to let him heal them. And, you know, finding ways for him to maybe not have healing spells per se, but like have more tangible, practical things that he can make. So it's like almost a little bit of artificer and like, I'm glad that you guys have let me keep him sort of focused as a bard warlock. Cause I don't know if I could learn another class on top of that, but like learning how to make medicine from the land, I think is also really interesting part of his character.
Yeah.
Where initially he was very disconnected, and was very like above others. Now he's becoming more integrated.
And it's sort of, I'm trying to remember, like, as in his backstory and things, I feel like in his bardic life, the snake oil peddling, it was a performance, and here's a vial of sugar water with a little bit of food coloring 6 times out of 10 or so. And now he's really tried to take the natural environment around him of this strange desert and start learning about the properties of the plants and animals there, and then turn those into something that actually works. He's essentially
something that might actually help people. Yeah,
he's made like a temporary black lung cure essentially for the people that mine this strange desert cactus in our game.
And I love that, like, it's not like he did that because, like, out of pure altruism, you know? Like, he did that, was like, oh shit, I can make lots of money doing this. I am gonna keep doing that. But I like to think that like over the course of this character, maybe he'll start to train people how to make it and like franchise, I guess. Then like having him move from being a very libertarian, I am in it for profit kind of person into somebody who is like, wait, I am a part of a community. I'm part of something bigger than myself. And like marrying those two ideas together of like, well, sometimes you can help other people and help yourself. And it's not necessarily a choice of one or the other. It's kind of fun.
The franchising strikes me as like so very, very Doc in that it's like still kind of a capitalist at heart. It's still on some level. There's like, well, I'll get royalties. I'll get money from this, but this person now knows how to make Doc Brinkley's patented potions. As it might be.
Well, also, I mean, but it's also a thing of trust where it's not just him doing it. And I feel like that's going to be the kind of thing, like at some point, I am hoping that he'll have more of a conversation with his parents, who he desperately wants to impress, but he was always like bad at the cleric stuff that his family was good at. I think he still has a sidekick kicking around that might show up at some point, who is like totally his yes man.
Maybe just maybe.
And I like that, you know, right now he's still very much of like, oh, I'm going to save my own skin. Like a lot of his spells are like expeditious retreat. It's like, how do I get myself the fuck out of here? Yeah. But he's slowly beginning to be like, oh, I can, like, there is a positive thing to do in entertaining the masses, or like, I am intrigued to talk to this spiritual aspect that I didn't have access to before, even if I don't fully understand it.
Sure.
I should note his family is all trickster clerics. So like the idea that he would have a trickster as a patron makes sense to him, because he's like, well, you know, she shows up in a lot of different guises, like whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's really fun. I think a lot of people in our campaign are playing somebody who thinks there's something else.
Wow. Yeah. I would briefly mention one of our players who is druid and fighter for thematic reasons. And although having 8 or 9 levels of druid to 1 to 2 of fighter, still keeps playing it like a fighter and like walking up and hitting things with a hammer. And I'm just sitting in the back going like, yeah, but you got like 5th level druid spells there, buddy.
Yeah, anyway. Like basically only animal shapes to like lug the caravan around. Like
pretty much.
But see, I love that because Doc has like no skill in nature. And so since Doc has decided that this druid is his best friend, he can kind of nudge this druid to lean more into the druid stuff in order to have help finding cure related ingredients. So it's very fun in that way.
It has been super fun. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your mid-roll. It is I, your host, Colin, here to thank you once again for listening. It is so nice and so important, and it feels so good that you are here with us. And also to remind you that if you never want to hear me say that again, if you just are excited about the show, if you love what we're doing, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/therollreport, where also, for as little as a single $1 a month, you can submit questions for our interview guests. Only our friends and supporters on Patreon can submit questions, and only they will get to hear the answers. We've got some really incredible guests coming up as usual, and if you want to hear their answers to your questions, head on over to Patreon. Also, you can follow us on social media. We are at The Roll Report Cast on Instagram and TikTok, and now on Blue Sky. Ooh. Follow us there for announcements about upcoming guests once they have been booked, and then you will find out if you have interesting and amazing and unusual questions for all of them. But thank you so much for listening. That's really all. We are so grateful you're here with us and hope you are enjoying this episode. Back to the show. I think before we spend the entire time only talking about our campaign, which we could totally do,
which is great.
I want to tell you a little bit about what 2024 is trying to do to Doc. And one of the things that I have learned is like it hasn't, the Warlock class has not gotten kind of the same top to bottom like makeover that some of the other classes of. A lot of the basic proficiencies and similar things are exactly the same. Your starting hit dice, your saving throws, your skills and weapons, like all the things. Everybody's starting equipment has changed, so meh. The biggest thing to me is that as it is written in 2014, from level 1 on, you know who your patron is. Your patron shows up and says, I am Ouroboros, you, Doc, will now be my new prophet and save the land. And as it has changed, in 2024 rules, that is now your 3rd level feature. You don't actually know your patron, your warlock subclass, until 3rd level. So you might just spend 3 levels of your intro game just going like, I don't know, I got a voice in my head.
Right.
Don't know who it is or how it affects me. And I think for me, so cleric has also changed. And they have all classes have now chosen 3rd level is when you get your subclass across the board. And I feel like that sort of loses some of the I guess I'm trying to think about like how you create a warlock and don't know who your patron is.
Yeah, I have to say I don't understand that. That does not make sense to me, because I feel like for warlocks and clerics in particular, their relationship with this otherworldly presence is a guiding principle of who they are. You're not playing a first character as a child most of the time. So like, I don't know. It just feels really weird to play like, I don't know. It'd be like playing, oh, you're a businessman, but you don't know the company you work for or what your role at the company is.
Company. It's
you work for a company. And I feel like, I guess there's a way to play that's interesting, but I think part of what is so compelling about these two classes is their sense of certainty, is their sense of like, this is a grounding principle of who I am. To wait until the 3rd level to start to build that out. I understand that it makes it the same across the board. I think what's going to happen is most people are going to start their campaigns at 3rd level.
Well, I think,
which is fine.
It's totally fine. And I think people kind of do that anyway. There's some new language, I think, in the player's handbook that I haven't gone cover to cover yet about, oh, level 1 to 3 is kind of for a beginner, never played D&D before a campaign. And sure, but from a game design perspective, that seems a little weird to just basically go, yeah, we're throwing away, a chunk of character progression and growth.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's hard to understand what your motivations are. Like a lot of the other classes, the motivation is pretty obvious.
Yeah.
But I think if your motivation is this otherworldly creature talks to you, you kind of need that from the get-go.
And I think really to know, or at least have some sense of who it is. I guess a lot of what we're saying, I think could be remedied or rectified with a good working relationship with your DM. If I as the player am going, hey Kitty, I want to make an Archfey warlock, and I know we're starting at level 1, so I don't know who the fuck it is, but like I just want to make sure that like that's where I'm headed, that's what I want long term, and so. How do we make this patron, you and I, together and have them interact with my character, even if I don't know who they are and they won't fully reveal themselves for 2 whole levels?
Well, I mean, I think it's also interesting, like, Doc knows who his patron is, but doesn't actually know anything about them. So, I mean, I think that there's also that. You can, like, Doc does not know what kind of patron he has. He's not aware that he has a patron. He
Thinks that he's
genuinely
hearing the
believes
voice of his deity.
that the trickster goddess is talking to him. And so there's no reason to question this any further. And so I don't know. I think that's an interesting part of it too, that like, I guess you could have some fun with like, oh, you have this patron, but you don't know if they're an archfey or if they are a devil or, you know, whatever. Like that could be interesting.
Yeah.
But
I mean, at the same time as we're talking about it, I'm like, the flip side of it, the cleric side of it, not the flip side, the cleric side, right? How do you devote yourself to I'm talking this out as I'm thinking about it. Like, do you flavor it as, oh, you're level 1 to 3, you're not devout enough to hear your deity back, or because presumably you have devoted yourself to a deity at that point. If you're playing a cleric, you're not going to say, oh, I just devote myself to the gods generally, or God singular generally, and I'll sort it out in 2 levels.
That would be really funny, though. That would be very funny to play an atheist cleric who suddenly has like a moment of like, oh shit, now they're talking to me.
Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah, I could see that. So, I mean, I guess there are ways to play it that could be really fun. But I mean, in general, I think that clerics and warlocks both, you really need to have a GM who is excited to be that patron or be that god or be that otherworldly presence.
It requires a little more collaboration and back and forth. Yeah. So, continuing the things that are the same, things that I'm just going to say, these are the same. It looks, as far as I can tell, your general number of spells known stay the same. I think the exact detail level to level might be slightly different, but you start with 2 spells of a first level slot and go up to 15 spells known and up to 5th level. You never get beyond 5th level. And that looks like that is the same. And eventually all the way up to a whopping total of 4 spell slots by 17th level.
Woo!
The other big change that I've noticed is kind of this is a twofold thing. For one, your eldritch invocations, now the pieces that your forbidden knowledge that imbue you with an abiding magical ability or other lessons, these invocations start at 1st level, and you eventually know up to 10 of them. And in 2014, they did not start until 2nd level, and you only know up to 8. So you have a couple more. And along with that is that pact magic, your pact boons, the Pact of the Chain and the Tome are now invocations. So you can take multiple of them if you want, but you also, like, it's not the official sort of subclass for you. Like, your subclass is now who your patron specifically is, and the specific pact is now just one of the invocations that you could change over time. I think I like this. I'm imagining that if we want to take Doc as an example, at a certain point, having this snake as your familiar might be less useful than having it, turn into a book bound in snakeskin that gives you the Pact of the Tome and lets you have ritual casting. And you can change up these invocations and spell slots still anytime you take a level in Warlock. So you can swap out a spell or a invocation of the appropriate level at any time you gain that.
So that's more flexible then. So you can kind of adjust. I like that you can kind of adjust that as the game goes on because, hopefully your character changes and grows over time. And so might start off one way and then end up wanting to be something different. Also, I think different, like having a familiar is super helpful in the earlier stages, but is fun, but not necessarily as
Mhm.
helpful in later stages.
Yeah.
As you keep playing. So that's kind of cool. I do also like with warlocks, you can change their spells out
Mhm.
when you're kind of stuck with other spellcasters. That what you have is what you have.
Some of them, yeah. So this is common to 2014 and 2024, the ability to change. I think I'm gonna say this, and I hope it is still the same, because I believe in both editions, bards and maybe rangers also have this. As you take a level, you can swap out one spell if you go rules as written. But the invocations thing, I think, is you've hit it exactly. Like, what is useful early in the game is maybe less useful later, or just your character grows and changes, and now that particular pact is not suited to how you're playing the character anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I like this. We're not gonna go through every single fucking invocation, because there are so many of them, especially with the pacts now added in. I think some of them, as I scanned over it, it looks like, again, the language has become more clear. If it's a thing that does the layout and how it has been written has just become more clear what they want, what Wizards wants that specific invocation or that rule to be.
Right.
So that's nice. The other changes, other fun things. Interesting. Okay, so we know that warlocks get their spell slots back after a short or long rest. But now, also at second level, you get magical cunning. You perform an esoteric rite for 1 minute, and then you regain your spell slots no more than a number equal to half of your maximum rounded up. And once you do that, you can't do it until long. So it's once per long rest. But so you get half of your spell slots back after a minute instead of having to sit around for an hour, which might be much more useful.
Yeah.
And now that ties into the 20th level feature. You just regain all of your spell slots at 20th level if you do this 1 minute ritual. And interesting. So that this is in 2014. That was the whole 20th level thing. They didn't have this sort of. It's kind of like the Wizards arcane recovery thing of like, oh, you can except it's only a minute. But in 2014, you can spend a minute at 20th level. You spend a minute entreating your patron for aid and regain all of your expended spell slots once per long rest. So that has stayed, but you've added in this ability, like the whole game along, to regain half of them rounded up at the end of a minute anytime during one game day. So I like that also. I'm like, that's really cool, and I'm kind of trying to think of the utility of it.
I mean, I guess it's helpful when you don't. I mean, as a warlock, you don't have as much oomph. So not making your whole party sit around for a short rest because you need to get your oomph back, because otherwise the next fight you're useless. That is helpful. We had one warlock in our party who basically supplemented his lack of spells through having wand of fireballs and stuff like that. Like the DM was like, here's a bunch of tools you can use instead.
Yeah.
And I think that helped, because otherwise, like, you spend a lot of your fights going, it looks like you guys got this.
Yeah.
Cool.
Here's an Eldritch Blast. You're doing great. You're doing great. Yeah.
So I do think it's nice to give them some options to have more utility with a group. Warlocks definitely feel like the sort of libertarian, like, I'm a lone wolf kind of like race, which is why it's so fun to blend it with Bard, because Bards are the complete opposite of that. They're like the sparkling gem of the party, and so like to have that mashed together is like two very opposite impulses.
Yeah. Yeah. They're really fun. Yeah, I think the converse of that I'm imagining is like, if you're a warlock in a party with monks and fighters, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, short rest all the time. Give me my key points and my action surge and stuff back. That's great. Let's sit for an hour. Yeah. But I agree. I like this. It gives you more utility if your spells if you've gone for more social interaction spells. Even some of the consent based ones that we were talking earlier, like and you're like, oh, hey guys, talk to this guy for 1 minute, and then I'll be able to like do this thing to him, and he'll do whatever we want. It's great. Just keep him busy for 1 minute, and you like go hide in a corner and pull out your whatever. Doc takes the snake off the hat band and like whispers in its ear for a minute, comes back and goes, hey guy, do what we want to. I like that. I think that's where I'm finding some fun in this moment of like imagining that scenario.
Yeah, this made me wonder, what spells did I take for
Oh, good question. What is Doc's
so
kit look like?
I took Mage Hand. And I have Disguise Self as an Eldritch Invocation.
Okay.
Hex, Unseen Servant, Mirror Image. So I think I took a lot of like illusion based stuff. So Spray of Cards. I definitely focused his Warlock stuff on stuff that felt more theatrical, circusy kind of stuff.
Yeah. He's got a lot of really. I'm excited to see where you go with Doc too.
He's very fun, and it's kind of interesting to.
Yeah.
Like I definitely want to use the familiar a little bit more since he has one. I would love for him to have more of a relationship with that. I think he's just kind of like that. We've been doing so much stuff that there hasn't been enough downtime to really sit with it.
I'm hoping to remedy that soon. That's my plan.
It's because we couldn't let go of this small child we found in a ghost town. No matter how much you guys tried to persuade us to give this child up.
We've offered so many off ramps for this small mute child who survived like a mine massacre, but she's been debatably safe with you guys so far.
Yeah, safer than other people.
Safer than other people, for sure. For sure.
It's also been very fun to play Doc as somebody who is a conspiracy theorist, and I'm really looking forward to adding more conspiracy theories to his board, which came in really helpful actually in our last session.
It did,
where
indeed.
I was like, oh, I can actually connect dots here, and it is true. Even though usually it then moves on from a true thing into a completely wild thing.
I really loved this moment as you were playing it out, because I was like, oh my God, the story actually sounds like a conspiracy theory in the language of this world. And it's absolutely true. And then there's this whole other bit that Doc has tacked on that is taking it to a further level. But just the fact that Doc put together, I was like, oh yeah, when you say it like that, it sounds like we're crazy.
Yeah, it absolutely sounds insane, which is what's so fun about it. Because that's true about real life. There are so many things that when you're like, well, see, but this leads to this, it's like, well, that's all intangible and it has a form of logic, but then so do a lot of conspiracy theories. And I love that Doc connected all of these dots and then said, and that's how I know we're on a flat earth. And like, that's just really funny to me.
That is
having those moments.
Yeah. Like, well, hollow, flat. Yeah. One of those things.
Yeah, sure.
So now, one of the last things I want to like highlight as a brand new, it does seem to be brand new thing. I'm like double checking myself. In 2024 rules, at 9th level, you gain an ability called Contact Patron. As it is written, it reads, in the past, you usually contacted your patron through intermediaries, say a snake hat. Now you can communicate directly. You always have the contact other plane spell prepared. With this feature, you cast the spell without expending a spell slot, and you automatically succeed on the spell's saving throw. And once you use this feature, you can't do it in that way until you finish a long rest. So by 9th level, the narrative implication to me is like, at that point, your patron knows who you are and has given you the method to directly reach them instead of getting their secretary.
Yeah. I think that's so funny. I kind of enjoy more that Doc can't get in contact with their patron directly. I think that is so much funnier. Because I'm imagining like that kind of like I grew up pagan, and I always joked that like my relationship to the gods was they always get my answering machine. Like if a god is calling me, I am not picking up. I am not home. I am not interested. Like, please leave me alone.
Yeah, no, don't worry about it.
It's very nice of you to call, but no. And I just love that the reverse of that in this relationship. It is handy, I think, to have a way to ask your patron questions.
Yeah.
But I also think it's kind of fun that it's not an equal relationship.
No.
You know, like
it never should be, I think.
Yeah, I think that's kind of important. And so again, I think there is a lot of similarity with the clerics too, where it's like you are doing the will of this otherworldly creature, and you don't really know what their intentions are, or like what they're doing, or why. You're just sort of like, well, that's what they said. And I love that Doc has this relationship with the cleric of our party who worships a completely different goddess, of like, well, you know how to get in touch with your god, so help me figure out that. And sometimes it works. So that's very fun. I
mean, that is super fun. I like also, as I'm thinking about it, like that's about when clerics get divine intervention, when you in theory would have this ability to directly implore your deity for aid, and 10% chance that they will answer you as you hope, that slightly increases as you level up. But I feel like one of the things that is being aimed for is really baking in mechanical rules for, yes, you can directly speak to your patron. They might not talk back. They might not have anything to say. They might tell you to fucking hang up and wait till they call you. But now, DMs, I think, should be prepared for a point in your campaign when your warlock is like, I cast contact other plane. Let me talk to my patron.
Right.
and not have to I don't even want to say shoehorn it in. Like, I don't feel like we are shoehorning Doc's ability to the messages that Doc has received from his patron in our case, or Doc's ability to try to ask the snake what the patron wants. But the way that in the 2014 rules, you're as a DM, you're sort of improvising what might happen, and you decide how much you want to let your warlock player talk to their patron, versus now the player can be like, no, this is what I want.
No, you're talking to me.
I'm doing it. Yeah.
You will hear me, actually. I will speak to your manager. I do kind of enjoy, like, I think one of the things that I would say is super important is, like, you and your GM need to figure out how often your patron is going to talk to you. Because I've seen people in campaigns where they've played a warlock and their patron never spoke to them, or very rarely. And that kind of takes the biggest fun part of being a warlock away. Like, one of the only advantages you have as a warlock is that there is somebody paying attention to you who is otherworldly, and therefore can give you some perspective that you might not have. And so if you don't use that, which does mean being creative in some ways, it does mean figuring out ways of, like, having your patron show up in a dream, or like, I just bought a pack of divination cards, serpent-based divination cards, as a way for me to not really talk to my patron per se, but to like find a way for Doc to seek guidance that we could then blend into the story. That doesn't involve necessarily directly. It's an opportunity for the patron to step in, but it's also an opportunity for Doc to begin to build a relationship in a sort of one-sided way of like, oh, I have some control over this. In a way that I feel like most tarot. Most tarot is that, right? Like you're doing it not because you're going to get a message from the another world, but because you're like, well, there are so many options of how to perceive what's going on. I need some focus. And these cards will tell me these are some good areas to focus on, you know? So definitely. I think that'll be a fun way to add that element in. So I would definitely say if you're playing a warlock, it is really important to talk to your GM and the other people at your table about ways that you can have more interactivity. It is a lot more storytelling focused, I think. So that's important. You have to be somebody who's excited to do a lot of improv and figuring out how to solve problems in more indirect ways because you can't immediately contact your patron. You don't necessarily know which nod means that yes or no, or if your
is it one or two?
Is just Who's a snake today? Like, you know, I think that stuff you have to be cool with that lack of control in a way that, you know, I feel like similarly, I felt this way when I was doing wild magic sorcery, where it's like, oh, I have a certain kind of control, but only up to a point. And I find that really fun. But you have to have a GM who is excited to do that with you, to play with you in that way.
I mean, and specific to wild magic, and to loop all the way back to our opening discussion, like for me, wild magic has become a thing where I want players to opt in on some level as well, depending on how often you want that wild magic to be a possibility. You know, again, my own horror story is like slight horror story is playing a campaign where someone, by arrangement with a GM, basically ended up rolling a wild magic surge literally every time the player did anything. Anytime they cast a spell, anytime they used magical guidance, anytime they used the Tides of Chaos thing to try to like change a roll, it was constant. And a lot of the time it was fine, and it led to a lot of interesting and entertaining roleplay. I was playing a Tabaxi bard who was given flesh rot more than once by a wild magic surge, and it led to this whole shaved cat joke that just lasted like the entire campaign. But on the other hand, one time this player managed to trap themselves in the ethereal plane and then summon 20 shadows that all tried to fight. And the rest of us are like, well, we now can't do anything because the rest of this session is going to be combat for this one player. And again, I mean, again, that's more a DM thing. In that instance of the DM, I think could have hand waved and said, all right, spend some spell slots, lose your hit points, and we're going to keep going. But that not all the players
you have everybody play one of those shadows, which would have also been very funny.
Exactly.
I feel like, because like, for example, I don't want Doc's relationship to his patron to overshadow Asheen, who is our cleric, to overshadow Asheen's relationship to our goddess, which is a stronger relationship, you know, because she's been a cleric, I think, the whole time. So like, she's 11 levels in cleric. Of course, she's going to have a closer relationship to her god. I don't want Doc's nonsense with his patron to overshadow a more serious religious situation, you know? And so finding ways to play around with that, finding ways to like Asheen and I and Doc have bonded over that. And we do have different spiritual beliefs, but we practice them differently, but there are things in common that has made it a fun little character interaction between them and like helped bond us together. I think it is very much, I mean, like everything D&D, right? It's about collaboration. It's about handing each other opportunities. Making sure that everybody feels like they're included. I mean, another example with the druid being able to talk to the creatures that I pull out of my bag of tricks. That is a really fun and interesting way for him to be involved with something that I summon in a way that, like, I have a relationship of power dynamic, but he has a personal relationship to these different creatures. He could probably talk to my snake better than I can. And so, like, I find that sort of thing really interesting, that that's a way you can bring your players together in these dynamics so that they all have to work together to a certain extent because none of them have all the information. I find that much funnier and also much more fun.
It has been both of those, fun and funny, watching these develop and watching you like really put this into practice for sure. And so to kind of close this out, like the other things, pretty much the same. Warlock's Mystic Arcanum ability of getting you get an amazing spell, 6th level, a 7th level, an 8th level, and a 9th level spell over time that you can cast once per day without using a spell slot. Though that is exactly the same, kicks in at level 11, and you get it every 2 levels. And you can replace one again as after when you gain a level, you can replace one of the Arcanum spells with a different one. I'm excited to see it depending on how many levels of Warlock you take, where Doc is going with these, because these are where you get like really weird, useful spells that you can just decide that they happen. A 9th level spell that you can just decide happens at least once a day.
Well, so I was looking at his character sheet, and he is level 11. He has 8 Bard and 3 Warlock. I think I will probably keep going Warlock, and then I'll take a little bit more of Bard. But I feel like I think the thing that will guide me as a player to which one I decide to level up is like how much interaction I'm getting. The more interaction I get with my patron, the more I'm going to dedicate to that. The more that being a fast talker and persuader and that kind of team buffing types of stuff, that's going to be more my Bard related stuff. So I feel like almost Bard. There isn't really a Bard class for this. I think I want to say I'm an Eloquence Bard.
I was going to say,
I'm a College of Eloquence
or
Bard.
Glamour. Yeah.
So I think that his skill in medicine, even though it doesn't naturally fit into the Bard archetype per se, I feel like that is more related to his Bardness, his support. With his party, while Warlock is more his relationship to the world. And the more he is learning about that other culture, the more he's learning about the nature around him, the more he's going to invest in Warlock, because that is where he's getting that information from. While Bard is going to be more about the party. And it's almost split in an interesting way of the Bard is civilization, the city, those kinds of like interpersonal relationships, politics. And Warlock is like the wild unknown. And I find that really fun too. It's very much, he is a creature of extremes and split personality.
It's interesting to hear you say that, and gives me good hope and plots and schemes for the future of our campaign, because I feel like one of the things that we have been trying to play with is who's to say what civilization is.
Yes.
And you're out here and on the frontier, and we have tried to create a Western themed setting that does not fall into some of the racist stereotypes and tropes of Westerns of the real world, but use that as inspiration. But yeah, when you are out on the edge of what is currently considered civilization, what does that look like? And versus the wildlands that are there, versus the now newly discovered, completely underground civilization that's already been there for generations, and is not happy about the encroachment of another group of people.
Well, and I mean, I think that's what's so like, I feel like making that decision, it is sort of a decision between the sort of capitalist libertarian of the city, of the capital, and the, anarcho-syndicalism of being more invested in learning about the culture that's already here and like understanding their complaints. We had a funny little moment where the party demanded to unionize against our leader, who was sort of bewildered and confused by that. But that was so much fun because I'm like, oh, this is where Doc is beginning to understand that, like, actually other people matter, and it's not just about him saving his own skin. And I think that that's like a fun, like, it was a fun moment, but it was also a really meaningful moment for him to understand why a collective is important. Because I mean, he doesn't have a family really. Like, he's an outsider in his blood family. His blood family didn't bail him out of jail.
Yeah.
I think that's notable,
I think he had this kind of close relationship with his as assistant number 2, like, the straight man to his huckster, but he's not seemed to have many strong relationships in the past, and is like forming them now, even, declaring the druid his best friend, who's now the druid is kind of like, yeah, kind of, I guess that's true.
Maybe. Yeah, like, through sheer force of will and occasional gifts.
It works.
It works. Yeah, I mean, like, I was just looking at Doc's relationships, and Colt Sawyer is the name of his assistant, who is a genuine believer in Doc's healing capacity, despite all evidence to the contrary. I find that really interesting because it sort of creates this dynamic where he has his mother who knows that he is not good at healing and is sort of disapproving of her son's insistence on role playing, being a cleric. And you have Colt, who's like, no, man, I believe in you. You have got this.
I saw you regrow that child's leg. You're amazing.
Absolutely. And then it's like, if Doc begins to understand that they're both kind of right and kind of wrong, where does that put him ethically? And so it is, I'm enjoying a lot playing a character who is flawed and who sort of comes into a more ethical way of being in the world. And I think Warlocks are a really good way to play with that. I mean, I feel like Warlocks are kind of the, like I said, the lone wolf, the sort of cagey bad boy, the sort of pouty emo class of D&D. And it's kind of fun to use that to explore those kinds of tropes.
Yeah, very much. Very much. Well, and you know what what I'm going to say is, as the parting, wrapping this up a little bit, like, one thing that I've kept noticing is how cool the 19th level epic boons are. And if Doc is multi-classed, we'll just give you one when your total of levels equals 19. Well, because they're so cool, and I don't want Doc/you, Kitty, to miss out on them. I think I think it's one of the other kind of across the board changes that I generally approve of. That every class, if you go straight through that class at level 19, you'll get one of the epic boons. Let me see, just because I haven't looked. The one recommended for Warlocks by the player's handbook is the Boon of Fate, which increase 1 ability score of your choice to a maximum of 30, and the ability Improve Fate. When you or another creature within 60 feet of you succeeds or fails on a D20 roll, I think, let's see, they define a test as ability checks, attack rolls, and saving throws. So any D20 roll. You can roll 2d4 and apply the total as a bonus or penalty to the roll of that creature. So you get 2d4 that you could make someone hopefully succeed or hopefully fail a d20 roll. Once you use it, you can't use it again until you roll initiative or finish a short or long rest. So you basically would get one use of this every time you start combat or every time you start initiative. Yeah.
That is interesting. Yeah.
So we'll make sure you get to choose something fun. Not going to deprive you of the delights of weird epic boons that will give me and my co-DM fits.
Well, I mean, that is the thing ultimately with D&D, right? It's like, if something is more cool to do by combining things than it is not to do it, like, I have, what is it? Like Pact of the Chain that allows me a familiar?
Pact of the Chain is the familiar, and
then we also kind of added in Pact of the Talisman because it was like, well, Pact of the Talisman isn't that cool by itself.
It kind of sucks by itself.
Fine,
I think there's a reason why it's
with
not
something
in the
else
new...
that it's fine.
Yeah. So to remind our listeners of this much maligned, rightly maligned pact, Pact of the Talisman, you get a talisman from your patron, and a certain number of times per long rest, which I think is equal to your proficiency bonus, you can add a d4 to an ability check specifically. Which, really underwhelming compared to, like, Pact of the Chain. You get a cool familiar that can also attack and do some things that normal find familiar spell animals can't. Or Pact of the Blade, and now you get to use your charisma bonus on hitting people with a sword or whatever. And so I'm happy we've done that, and I'm again excited for like the chaos that you will cause with it.
For sure.
On that note, Kitty, thank you so much for joining me. Where can people find you or your books on the internet if they would like to do so?
Well, you can find me at kittystryker.com. I'm Kitty Stryker on Blue Sky. I'm Kitty_Stryker on Instagram. I am slowly pulling myself off of Facebook. You can still find me there for now as
it's
officially Kitty Stryker. It is really hard to keep off of there, especially as a professional creator of any kind. Generally, if you look for Kitty Stryker, you will find me or traces of me, but don't Google that while you're at work. I used to work in the adult industry, so, just be aware going in.
And we will have links to all of these things in show notes, including where you can reserve a copy of Love Rebels. Wait, let me see if I can remember it. Love Rebels, How to Burn Everything Down Without Burning Out.
Basically, yeah.
Well, okay.
It's like how I learned to burn it down without burning out.
Okay, I missed. I should have remembered.
Very close.
And also Say More, consent. I'm not gonna remember that. Consent talks for the teenagers. I know that's not the real subtitle.
Say More, consent conversations for teens, which is honestly a much easier subtitle to remember.
It's, I've lost my ability to put things in short-term memory for an hour and then extract them. When I was teaching more, I could do a room full of people, 25 names, remember everyone for an hour, and then not know who they were as soon as they walked out of my class. And you can, of course, follow The Roll Report on social media. We have also joined Blue Sky and Instagram and TikTok. We are at The Roll Report Cast everywhere, where you can find special new things, announcements for upcoming interviews and guests. And of course, if you like what you hear, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/The Roll Report. Kitty, a pleasure as always. Looking forward to seeing what Doc will do on Thursday. And,
me too.
Yeah.
I never know.
Honestly, we plan a whole session, and then usually we save half of it for the next week because it didn't happen, and you guys did something totally unexpected. But
Yep.
we love it. Thank you so much for joining us. And I say us, the proverbial, the royal us, of course, the royal we, as it were. And delightful to have you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And until next time, I don't know, keep rolling? Is that a weird thing to have in an outro? Sure. Keep rolling. Why not?